Well, hey, on this episode, we have a missionary to Africa with Overland Missions here to talk to us about what God's doing in those countries, as well as the things he's been able to see. Come on, we have Josh Holt. Awesome. Well, Josh, thanks for being on the show, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course, dude. I appreciate it, man. I know it's cool to see, like, knowing you for a while and now seeing what you've stepped into in the last, like, year and a half has been exciting, man. Like, you share with everybody listening kind of like what you've been doing over this past, like, year or so.
Yeah. So over the past about year and a half now, I transitioned from running a full-time video production company, and I've taken over the media department for Overland Missions. And so Overland Missions, for those who don't know what it is, it essentially is a missions organization that isn't really focused on like aid or things like that. We're solely focused on reaching remote and neglected people with the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we're based in 19 different countries now, continually growing. And we get to do some of the coolest stuff on the planet.
It's incredible, dude. Maybe like I want to use this time tonight to really walk through like all like the things that you've been able to do and what you guys have seen God do. I'd love to also just maybe start for people to kind of journey along with you, like how it all started for you kind of making this transition to like where you're at today.
Yeah.
Because dude, you're part-time in America, part-time Africa, right?
Yeah.
Like so to maybe walk us through a little bit of like how you got to this role.
Yeah. So 2022, I go to Grace City Church, helping with a ton of the video production stuff there. And I get a call from, I believe it was Lewis at the time. He's like, hey man, like we've got this whole thing going. They really want to promote missions coming up. Would you fly to Africa for 2 weeks? And I was like, yeah, I can probably make that happen.
That's cool. It's a call you don't get that often.
Yeah.
You know?
So I was like, sure, I would love to. And so I go over there solely with the like focus of like, all right, I'm just capturing a video that needs to promote missions and really inspire people to go on trips, give to trips, that sort of thing. And so we get over there, and the leader of the trip, who I'm actually marrying in like 2.5 weeks.
It's wild. We'll get to that too. Yeah.
She goes at the very beginning, like we're all sitting down, I'm getting video stuff ready. And she's like, hey, you two, like you're part of the group. Let's all just write down things that we would love to see God do while we're here on this missions trip.
Yeah.
And so I sit down and I'm starting to think about it as like, you know, I've been around the church almost my whole life, but I've never seen like a physical healing. Like I never see, like you hear about in the Bible where someone like is blind and sees, and like, or deaf is now hearing again. I'm like, Lord, I would love to see that. Like if I could see that would be the coolest thing. Fast forward a couple of days, we're just going house to house, just walking between people's homes, and they're welcoming us in. We're sharing the gospel with them. And we come upon this woman and her daughter is kind of like helping us talk and everything. And all of a sudden she's like, yeah, like, can you guys pray for my mom? She can't see or hear anything. And so as a group, we go like lay hands on her and just start praying that the blood of Jesus over her and everything, and that the Lord, who is a healer, would work. And all of a sudden, like the entire time, she's just like head facing forward. Like she's got nothing going on. That's like, she can't see or hear anything.
Right.
And so she's just facing forward, and that's that. And all of a sudden, like she starts just turning her head to the side because she's hearing something. There's people like over in one of the directions. And so like all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And they start translating. Oh, she can looks like she's starting to be able to hear. And all of a sudden we continue to pray for her like 2 or 3 more times. And she starts calling out the colors of the shirts that we're wearing: blue, white, red. And it's like, oh my gosh, this woman who's like clearly like, she had nothing like motivating what she was doing or anything. Like she starts turning her head and she's looking at people and talking. And it's like, whoa, God, what are you doing here?
Sheesh. Yeah.
And so at the end of that trip, I'm blown away. I thought I was just going to record some video stuff, and like instead I'm having like just my mind blown over here. And I start just asking like, so what else is like coming up next for you guys? And like, hey, we're gathering a ton of chiefs from all over Zambia this October, and it was June at the time. I just start feeling the Lord prompt me like, hey, they need your help. I'm like, I don't think they do, God. I think they probably got it handled. They're gathering a bunch of chiefs and stuff. But I end up asking, they're like, yeah, we would love your help. So I fly back in October, and it was supposed to be just some chiefs. And all of a sudden, it's not just some chiefs, it's every chief in Zambia, 244 of them, and 57 kings and queens from all over Africa.
Jeez,
and so I'm like, whoa, what am I doing here? We're like in these motorcades pulling people from the airport, and there's just like 30, 40 cars in a row, just like, shoo, 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 like flying by and everything. I'm like, I'm in the middle of something that I do not understand. So for like 3 or 4 days, they're just preaching the gospel, sitting down, sharing dinner with the chiefs and the kings and everything.
Yeah.
And we're getting to have these amazing conversations where the chiefs and the kings are just opening up doors for us to go into kingdoms that we're not in, just bring the gospel, and they're like specifically requesting it. And so I fly home at the end of that trip, and I'm like, Lord, I have no clue what you're doing here, but this is cool. I don't know why I'm a part of it. And just kind of feel him prompt me, like, figure out what the next step is with them, like, see how you can help and just take that step.
Yeah.
And so I go and I look at what that next step is, and there's like a 3-month training program. And so this point, I'm still running my business, but I'm like, I guess I could take 3 months, go figure out how I can help him in the future.
Yeah.
And I'll do that.
No, not thinking at all that like this will become like
No.
where I live and what I do.
Absolutely
like, yeah.
not. Like in my mind, like my dream growing up is like, I want the freedom to do what I want. Like if my brother calls me having a bad day on a Tuesday, I can just drop whatever I'm doing and I can go grab the kayaks and we can go spend some time on the water. If some of my guys are snowboarding and they want to go snowboarding next month, like, yeah, I can drop whatever I'm doing. I can go do that.
It was about like the freedom at first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which interesting. I want to get more to, I want to go back to like a couple of those stories, because that's so like, it's so unique. Like the first one, especially, like, you're right. Like it's like, if I wonder what it is that, when we get in scenarios like that, that we like are able to see like just like real healings, you know what I mean? Like, cause I feel like if you're a believer, like listening to this, maybe you can like attest to that too. But myself is like, man, I prayed for like healings for things I've gone through or things that I've been feeling, whatever, like, or family members. And like, I don't know, maybe it's a faith thing where it's like, I kind of have this like internal expectation of it happening slowly over time, but like, there's something about like these scenarios where like you're at a place and like you see like just miraculous stuff happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see it left and right over there. And I haven't figured out the theology behind it or what the Lord's doing or anything, but all I know is that like when you ask the Lord to show up, he generally does. And so like my fiance right now, she's leading revival meetings like up in Jacksonville and stuff. It's where she lives currently. Yeah. And they're seeing people get healed at these revival meetings in the States. And it's like, man, it's awesome. It's not just an Africa thing. Like,
I wonder if I don't even have like all full thoughts to this. This could derail, but like, I just wonder if it's like something to do with distractions, not to like, I've personally never been to Africa, so I have zero like understanding of how, like, I'm sure like obviously tribes in that live very differently than what we live.
Slightly, yeah.
But like a little bit, yeah. You saying slightly, I was like, wait, really? Like, but then I got it. But like, you know, like so many distractions, so many like built up expectations where it's like even in the sense of healing where it's like, well, you know, God, if you don't heal me, there's probably like a pill that I can take and like it'll like go away or whatever. So like there's kind of like a net, like a safety net, or I don't know what that is, but like a plan B or whatever.
Because we have a reliance on other things. Like all of a sudden, if I don't get like healed by like when you come pray for me because my leg's broken or something, I'm just going to go to the doctor. I'm going to get a cast. Yeah. Or like if all of a sudden I have a stomach ache that I've had for a few months, I'm going to go to the GI doctor, get it figured out. Whereas like over there, they're like, all right, we're going to go to the witch doctor or we're going to die.
Yeah. Like it's like there's no other options. It's like I just need something. Well, even in that case, not that it's like a good thing, but it's like I need something supernatural. Yeah. Like to something outside of me to be able to fix this, you know?
And they already have that reliance on spiritual things a lot of the times because they're going to witch doctors and stuff. So they already know that like some spiritual thing can heal them. So when all of a sudden you introduce them to Jesus, who is the greatest healer and the only healer, things happen because they have that belief and that faith already.
Yeah, that's unique too. I feel like it's unique where like even, and you probably have more experience with this too, like even remote tribes or stuff like that from what I've heard, and obviously you're more of an expert than I am, but like even before knowing Jesus or knowing this stuff, they have some form of like a religion or spirituality or things like that. And I personally think, like, just based on like our shared faith too, like being Christians, is like when they meet and encounter like Jesus, it makes so much sense and it's so easy because it's like they've been trying to answer this particular question, and it's like for the really churchy thing is like the Jesus shaped hole in your heart or whatever, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's a better way to say it, but that's kind of it, where it's like, oh, this is the thing that it just makes sense. This is the thing that I've been looking for, you know? One which I bet like for you, I mean, I'm sure there's been moments for you guys where it hasn't been like easy like that, right? Or
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the Lord shows up and as you ask, and other times it's like the answer's not right now or something along those lines. But that's up to the Lord to decide.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think that what we kind of find that they're really looking for is like anyone anywhere is looking for their identity to be kind of like found and restored. And sometimes it's broken within us before we meet the Lord. And then all of a sudden you meet him and you realize like, oh, I am a new creation in Christ. Like everything else has come off of me and like I can walk truly like as his son and daughter and like, boom, things change.
I love that, dude. Well, cool. So then going back to the other story too, because I feel like this will open us up for more like just what you've been like doing, like meeting with like kings and queens and people like that. Like that's still a big deal, right? Like, I mean, even like for there, I'm imagining, or from maybe what we've talked about before, it's less of like potentially countries, right? It could also be like kings and queens of villages or things like that, right?
So so they're kind of split it by people group. And so before like people came in and colonized and drew specific country lines, like it's their people groups. And so sometimes those span across borders and whatnot. And so in certain ways, it's kind of switched between like political figures and then like traditional authorities in a sense.
Yeah, I got it. So is it kind of like, I mean, I guess for lack of a better term, it's almost like the king or queen of like England too. It's like this like authority figure, not necessarily just kind of like the person they see is like the wise person they go to, right? Or
in some ways, because like in some ways they look to that traditional authority as like the authority over certain things, but they might not be the authority over who's making sure the roads are paved, but they're kind of commanding what's going on in their day-to-day life.
Yeah. So like you go there, they have all these kind of like the doors just open with kings and queens and leaders and all that kind of stuff. Like maybe lead us into just kind of what that's opened up for you now that you've really stepped into this. Like you just got back not that long ago. Like how long were you there in Africa? You were there for like months, right?
Yeah. So my general rotation now is I spend about 7 months overseas each year and then 5 months back in the States at our headquarters.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like when you were there, like maybe walk us through like, this is probably like changes from week to week, but like walk us through like what does a week or what does like a day look like for you?
Yeah, it depends so much on where we're at. I want to say I was in like 7 or 8 countries just in the couple months that I was over there this year. Me and Devin are going to be, I think, in 15 or 16 over the next like few months, which is, it's going to be a wild ride for sure.
Yeah.
But if I'm just on Rapid 14, our like main international logistics base, it can look like all sorts of different things. Like there's a full community there of just people that are just doing ministry in different ways. And so it could be just day to day, like going to the warehouse, seeing if things need to be worked on, going up to, I've got like a little mini office that I'm working on some media stuff upstairs. Or sometimes people are going out into a village and we kind of accompany them, go house to house with them. Or we go on some crazy expedition, 6,000 kilometers through multiple countries, visiting remote tribes. Like it changes constantly.
Yeah. I think like stories about that, because you've told me a couple are like just so fascinating. Like you guys, it's not just like, hey, we know like, oh, this people group is like you can't put it on Google Maps. It's not like you can say, oh, they're like 20 minutes down the road. You guys have to like go find people, right?
Yeah.
Like what has that been like?
So we've got a long-term team in Angola that like absolutely is crushing it. And so they've been there like 12 years, like before like people could even get like tourism visas, like they were in there. They're just amazing. And so they work with a couple different tribes. One of them is called the Kuvali tribe. Yeah. They've been working with them for like 12 years. And so they're like, if you go into Angola and like look at some photos of like traditional tribes, like they're going to be the ones that pull up. But they're like warring, like they'll pull up and they'll kill people and they'll rob from people. And like, they're not exactly like the people that you're like, oh yeah, I want to go hang out with those guys.
Yeah.
Like, they're scary. And so the first time we're driving through, we're on like the tail end of the trip. And we're probably about 4,500 kilometers into this trip. We're like probably a month in. And so we're going to spend some time with them. And there's another tribe that our goal was, after meeting with them, we're going to just try and find this tribe. They're called the Himba, and people have like, we just want to work with them. No one really knows where they're at. They're a nomadic tribe. So they could be here, they could be there. You don't really know. And so they've never heard the gospel ever before. And so we sit
Mm-hmm.
down with these Kuvali guys the first day on this trip that I'm there with them. And we're sharing about the gospel. We're sharing that God's a healing God. And these 5 guys like walk into our camp. And they look like they're on a war path. I think I've shown you photos before.
Yeah, I think I remember this. Yeah.
Dude looks like he is ready to just mess some people up. And it turns out after some stuff gets translated that some of the Kuvali guys, as they kind of tend to do, stole 8 of their cattle, took them away. And like, so that would be like us robbing someone's like money from the bank. Like their bank is their livestock. And so all of a sudden they're not happy. They're ready to kill people and just take their cattle back. And so we're like, hey, before you do that, wanted to sit down with us, hear what we have to say. We'll mediate it after. And so they sit with us and we're just kind of continuing to share the gospel. And all of a sudden it's not like American church where they're like, oh yeah, like we're just going to wait till you finish talking. They start interrupting. And so one of the points that they start interrupting is like, we think we understand what you're talking about. We have a God who we know of who heals, but all we know about him is that when we stub our toe or something, we call on him and his name's Huku. And that's who we call him because he's the only God who heals that we know of, but we know nothing else about him. Can you tell us, is that your God? And can you tell us more about him? And so we're like, yeah, our God is the only God who heals. So this God that you've heard of in passing, that's our God.
Yeah.
And so we start sharing all about this with them and they're asking questions and more questions. And pretty soon they're like, all right, well, if your God's real, prove it. One of us has an issue with our knee. One of us has an issue with our back.
Sheesh,
Prove that your God's real. And we're like, okay. And it's like one of those moments where you're like, all right, God, this one's on you,
please,
man. Like,
show up.
Please, like, they got machetes, man. And so like, we just go over and lay hands on him and like, Lord, we're just declaring healing over them. And pretty soon, like 30 seconds, 40 seconds of prayer, we just step away and like, Lord, like do your thing. And all of a sudden they just start bending down, like dude with the back issue completely healed. Dude with the knee issues just starts flexing his knee and like doing jumping jacks and stuff. And we're like, whoa,
wow.
You just did that in that moment. God, that's so cool. And so all of a sudden they go, okay, cool. Your God's real. And like in my mind, like I get healed from something like that. I'm like, I'm not an emotional guy, but I might have an emotional response. And it's just like matter of fact. Like, yeah, that was real. Cool.
Dude, it's so interesting. It's so interesting too, like hearing you say like, where he's just like, we have this God who like, if we need healing, like if we stub our toe or do whatever, we ask for him, but there's nothing else we know about him.
It's crazy.
Like, it's interesting to me. Like, I can't like fathom like this, I guess like maybe it's the culture we live in or whatever, just like the lack of information or even just the lack of kind of trying to like dive deeper. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just like, we have a God that heals, but like, I don't know if he does other things or whatever. Right. It's just like, this is his area of expertise.
Yeah.
You know,
but like Paul had that God that he talked about, the unknown God and that was the God, our God. And so I think it's the same thing where they're like, yeah, we've heard of all these different gods. We've got this one that's kind of random that we don't know about. And that's ours. And I think that's something super cool. And so all of a sudden after that, they're like, hey, so like, we're telling him like, hey, you're part of the Lord's kingdom. Like you're part of this now. Like you're his sons and daughters and everything. And they go, awesome. And they understand like real kingdoms. Like they understand like what it is to have someone over them, like physical land borders and everything. And so they're like, cool. Our people, like the rest of our people, can they also fit in this kingdom? We're like all taken aback. We're like, oh my gosh, like they see it in such a different way. And it's like, yes, they can. Like everyone is welcome into the kingdom. And so all of a sudden they're like, cool. They're right here, like, and gave us like the approximate like place that we need to go find them and everything. And so this tribe that we were just hoping to find like anyone from, they're like, yeah, the exact location what we're at right now is right here. You can go find them on our way through.
Wow.
So like God massively opened a door and answered prayer there. We actually went back again this year and got to like sit with them for days and just like saw a massive change in their tribe. And the ones who we first met with, like they're there and like talking with us and everything. It's like the coolest thing.
Yeah. How do you guys, I guess this is an interesting question for me, like curious, like how do you guys, besides just continually going back, checking in on them, having more conversations, how do you guys actually like equip them for like these tribes and these people? Like how do you equip them for when you guys leave?
Yeah.
You know?
That's a great question. Yeah. And so the way that Overland kind of works is they've got like 2 main departments. One is an expeditions department. And so they'll go in and they're kind of like our spearhead where they'll go in and they'll do all the evangelism and that kind of thing and break open an area, find people, do recons into new lands.
Yeah.
And then we've got our long-term guys that are assigned to a specific sector, a specific people group. And they're the ones who go back week after week after week and continue to disciple people. And they raise up leaders within those tribes who start to understand the word and start to disciple them. And now we're actually seeing some of their guys. There was a Kuvali guy named Isaac that we kind of worked with for years now, the long-term team there. And they've raised him up and discipled him. And now he's kind of like the leader of all of the Angolans that work with our team, like the local guys. And he's actually translating the Bible into Kuvali for the first time. They've never had a written language before. And the first thing that like the government's now like agreed to is like the language that they can learn, the first written language, and like that book will be the Bible. And it's like,
that's crazy. So they've never had a written language before?
No, everything's verbal.
So you guys are having a hand in like developing like their written language?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like, and that's just like one small subset of what's going on across the world.
Yeah. So how many, I mean, based on that, like you guys have people that kind of go periodically. I know there's trips that come from like different like churches and things like that come visit. And then you have people who are like dedicated to specific areas. What's the team like over, like what side, how many people are actually a part of this over there?
Yeah. So over specifically in Angola, I want to say there's 12 or 13 like people total split by like families and everything. I think 4 or 5 sectors, and I might be off slightly by that, but and then with that they all have disciples under them that are like the Angolan guys, and so there's probably like 20 or so 30 maybe local Angolan guys that they're regularly discipling that go out with them and help translate with some of those languages, that sort of stuff, and that kind of spreads across every country we're in.
Yeah.
So like we have 400 Western missionaries across 19 countries right now. And then all of their disciples and all the short-term teams that go out, that adds on to it. And
man,
it's a massive thing.
That is crazy. How cool. It's just so cool to think like too, like being able to like just finding people and then like staying consistent in like a community like that to try to see like life change. And it's cool because I feel like I even see like you talking about it, like the long-term plan of like, hey, we've raised up somebody enough to where now it's like, it doesn't have to, and I'm sure you guys still do go in and check and stuff like that, but like, it doesn't have to be our team. Like they have people in their community now who are able to raise up others.
Yeah.
And like, that's how you reach a tribe, a nation. Like, man, incredible, dude.
It's the coolest thing. Cause even in Zambia, we've kind of seen that where we'll generally have like someone who's like a sector manager, like a Western guy over a certain area. And then our goal is always to replace them with one of like our main disciples. And so now we've got certain sectors in Zambia where it's a Zambian who's running things on their own, like with a team that they've built up underneath them that we've kind of handed things off to. And like, they're in charge of like raising funds to build their own bases and do ministry out from there. And like, we've got guys like, there's a guy named Fred and he's crushing. He was like the sector manager on the first time I went over. And it's like, it's so cool to see the way that like you're slowly able to hand things over to them and they run with it and they love it.
That's incredible. So you guys aren't necessarily, or maybe you are, like, you're not necessarily like building churches over there, but you guys are really just kind of focused on like reaching communities that just don't have the gospel whatsoever.
Yep. We're not building churches. We're not like trying to replace a church, anything of that sort. We're just coming in with the message of Jesus and the gospel and trying to share that. And then if they're at a church or not at a church, we're trying to just get them plugged in properly with people who they can actually learn from. And because sometimes the person who's like leading the churches are like, you get the nicest shoes or you actually own a Bible and they might not know truly what's going on. So we just want to connect them and actually disciple them on what the word of God truly is.
Yeah. And I can imagine too, like with their life and their thinking being so different, even from just what we've talked about, like for a nomadic tribe, it's like, what do you have like a church building, you know what I mean? No. You're moving all the time. So it's like, you're not going to have it, but it's how do you carry that with you wherever you go?
Yeah.
Dude, wild. Have how has it been? Maybe switching gears a little bit. I'd love to hear more stories too, but like what was it like for you kind of getting adjusted to like life in Africa versus like being here? You know, like you grew up in America your whole life, right?
Yeah. I was a Boy Scout growing up, so I think I had like an edge on some people going over. I loved growing up. My dad
You've
would
camped
always take
before.
us camping, hunting, that kind of thing. But the thing that I wasn't prepared for was the pace. It's such a slower pace. It's so much more personal. Whereas like here in the States, I'm like, all right, I've got my calendar. If I'm going to be here at 5:30, I'm walking through the door at like 5:29, 5:30.
Yeah.
Like not trying to be late. Like that's how you respect someone. Whereas they're like, oh yeah, person in front of me is the most important person. So if all of a sudden you and me are talking and I have something scheduled in like 30 minutes and you and me need to talk for 2 hours, like you get my time and they'll be okay with the fact that you're late.
Yeah.
Like, which is just wild to me.
So it's just custom there. It's like, yeah, things just happen when they happen.
And so people will be like, yeah, we're on African time, we're on Zambian time. And it's like, all right, so people will not be showing up right on time.
Did it like doing that for 7 months and then coming back over here? How was it like, is it weird getting back adjusted? And like,
it is. Cause like when you're over there, you're like, man, like I kind of slowly adjust to that pace and it's really nice and everything. I'm a little bit slower to respond to my messages and that's caught up with me. I've like been worse coming back to the States about responding to my messages, which is killing me.
Yeah.
But it's like those sorts of things kind of like, you kind of switch back and forth easy, but also like it's tough to do that difference in pace.
Yeah. Well, and with your role too, like you being kind of over media and capturing like the stories and stuff that's happening, you're probably on the go a lot too. So like, it's not necessarily like you're at a base, you're camping out. You guys are like moving a lot too, right? Yeah. What is it like do you guys just go until you can't like go anymore, like till it's dark and then just make camp or?
So it kind of changes depending on what we're doing. And so one kind of hard and fast rule in Overland is like, you're trying not to drive at night. It's generally not as safe. You'll be driving 60 miles an hour down the road and just all of a sudden there's 30 cows deciding they need to cross in front of you.
Yeah.
Try not to hit a cow or anything. And so for the most part, the way that like our expeditions work is like, we'll go to what the headman or like the mayor essentially of the area is and we'll like request like him to like, hey, where can we camp? Where can we stay? And he'll like set up a place for us before we even get into an area. And then when we come back with a team or something, we're staying in that area and we've got like a set place that we're staying. Yeah. Which is pretty solid.
Dude, you said cows. I'm thinking like running into like lions or stuff like that. Like, is that have you had something crazy like that?
Dude,
like
we got a call probably like a month before I came back to the States and they're like, hey guys, just so you know, a bunch of lions escaped from like a place that like kind of does showings for tourists and everything. They're like, there's a bunch of lions that are just like on the loose. So like try and stay in your cars if you're driving back to base or something. And so like there's that all the time. And then there's always elephants. Like we've got a bunch of workers that are Zambian on our base. We hire from like some local areas around us. And some of the guys, like you'll all of a sudden someone doesn't show up to work and like the guy next to him be like, oh yeah, he got just absolutely destroyed by an elephant last night. And you're like, what?
No way.
Yeah. And so like we'll be like rushing guys to the hospital sometimes and stuff. Because those elephants, for some reason, I don't know what it is, they hate shiny bicycles. Like,
oh, really? So they'll just come up and like mess you up.
Yeah.
That's a huge animal to mess you up, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like I've seen they're pretty smart too, right? Like they learn. Have you had a moment like I mean, and I don't actually know like the geography or like where that stuff is in Africa because you guys are like. Are you guys more northern or southern Africa?
So we're sub-Saharan Africa. We're kind of like center of like the southern part of Africa.
Gotcha. So that kind of like, it wouldn't be uncommon to run into animals like that or whatever.
No, like generally on our drive, like there's probably a 40-minute drive to like where like the local like town is from our base. So like if you're gonna go buy groceries, that kind of stuff. Yeah. You're driving by and you'll probably see a couple elephants or random things on the drive in.
So it's just normal. So different than where you grew up, dude. Yeah. Like it's with stuff like that, and like you mentioned earlier, like warring like tribes and stuff like that, do you guys think a lot about like protecting, like how do you protect yourself as a team or stuff like that, or what does that look like?
So I think it's definitely like a thought that a lot of our leaderships kind of dealt with and everything. Like the founder was in the South African Army prior to like starting Overland and everything. And so there's definitely some thoughts behind like how we protect from animals, but most of it's just using caution and just being wise in what you're doing. Like we're never gonna go pick up a ton of cash from the bank and just flaunt it on our way back. Like it's just not wise thing to do in the first place. And then with animals, you give them their distance. They'll do their thing, you do your thing kind of thing. But for the most part in Zambia specifically, like you're not really worried about like war or anything like that at the moment, thank God. In certain areas, like you do kind of start worrying about that. We're in a couple different areas around the globe where like that's a real concern. And so our teams are really cautious and have like plans for like, okay, what happens if these things occur?
Like how do you evacuate? Just get out.
Exactly.
Man, wild. It says you don't think about that like here, like in your day to day of like, man, if I'm traveling or whatever, it's like kind of all the same to me. You know what I mean? Right. But you guys could go like an hour or two, I guess, outside of where you are and
completely different story.
Yeah. Are there any, just speaking to that, like, I'd love to hear, like, is there a story like from this last time that you were there that just really stands out to you as like, I mean, something like incredible that happened or just like unique story?
Yeah, going back to Angola again.
Yeah.
So I was telling you guys about the Kuvali, warring tribe. Like they're your thieves, they're your murderers, sort of thing. Some of our guys that work with us now are former, like they're not former, they're Kuvali, but they now know and love the Lord and everything.
Yeah.
And so we go to the Himba for the second time. We're spending some time with them. And we tell them like, hey, we're going to feed you. Like you guys come ready to eat and we'll like feast together. And then we'll just talk about the Lord and worship him. And so we go and we prepare to do that. And it's our Kuvali guys that like go and buy the goats and go and then bring the food to them. And so all of a sudden these guys are like, wait a second, these guys who are thieves and murderers and everything that should normally be stealing from us the way we know it have now bought food from us and are now feeding us the food they bought from us and have brought more to give to us. And all of a sudden they started like kind of, what's different about this? Like what's going on here? And like, they were just so open and attentive when they started having those realizations. They're like, man, something's actually different about these guys. What is it? And they started realizing, oh, it's what we're sharing.
Man, what a cool way to like also like present the gospel, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's so much of like, you guys are just showing what God is doing, you know?
Like this is the transformation of someone when they've met Christ. Like this is someone who is truly a new creation. This is their new identity in the Lord. This is an example.
Does Overland, like curious, like I know like obviously they have the training program for people that want to move over there, like similar to what like you did.
Yeah.
But like, do you guys have like a school or training program for like people there in Africa that like see what you guys are doing and want to like step into it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So a lot of our people will come in and they'll start being discipled in a local area or something, and get plugged in as ministry partners where they're like translating. Cause like, believe it or not, there's so many languages in Zambia and I know none of them other than English.
Have you tried? Do you know, like, I'm sure you know like a few things, right?
Like Tolumba is like, thank you in one of the languages and everything. And like, you'll start picking up on some of those things. But for the most part, I'm like, man, yeah, I need my ministry partner
100%,
to figure this one out. Cause you'll go and someone will speak 3 different languages. And you're like, yeah, I don't got that one. And so we'll start training up ministry partners, discipling them. And then if they want to start working almost like full time with us, we have something called OMT, which is like Overland Missions training specifically for the locals. It's advanced mission training for our Westerners. And then they go through a really similar course, but not working as much with the cross-cultural, like Western side of things. They're working solely on like the theological side of things and like what it looks like for them to work with their people. Or sometimes we send people from their country out into others. Like we're starting to see Zambians go to DR Congo, and like we're hoping to send Brazilians into like Angola or Mozambique, where they speak the same languages.
So interesting, dude. That's what is like when, I don't know if there's like, I'm sure you guys have like stats and stuff like that of just like the impact that's being done over there. Like in this past year, is there like some stats on just like the people that you guys have reached? Sorry if I'm calling you on the spot too. Give me numbers, but like I'm curious about that because it's cool to see like for people that are listening to this and envisioning like, I mean, there's so many of us, right, who like would listen to this and we've never stepped foot maybe outside of the country or never even gone to like Africa to envision like, oh, this is such a unique thing. Like, what's the scale of like, man, the impact that you guys are actually like able to have over there, you know?
Yeah. There's some stats that we have. I know they're posted on our Instagram. Unfortunately, my Wi-Fi is way too slow.
That's okay.
Oh, here we go. This year just recorded, like there was more than this, but like specifically, like we wrote down their names. Like these are people that we connected with.
Yeah.
25,578 people across all of our countries reached with the gospel. 177 that were baptized in water. Let's see, Angola alone saw 759 reached in this past year. Brazil, 469. And like different places, the Middle East saw almost 1,996 reach with the gospel.
That's wild.
And so like all across, like just some crazy things. Zambia is one of our like huge hubs. We saw 17,000 reach with the gospel. And so it's just, we're going to their houses, sitting with them, sharing the gospel. And so like, this is people who are like hearing the gospel for the first time.
Is that all time or was that last year?
This is all in 2024.
That is
like crazy awesome stuff.
That's like, and not to belittle this, because like it's a unique, it's like an amazing feat to say you have like, I mean, that's almost, we're adding those up, right? That's almost 50,000 like people or so, right?
I think it was like 25 or 27,000 or something
Oh,
like
27,000 was the total. Still
that was
incredible.
the total.
27,000 people that have like made a decision in 1 year. That's like, I mean, some churches, and again, not to belittle this, but like some churches in America, that's like what you see in like, you know, the lifespan of the church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If that.
Right.
And to see like the impact you guys are having over there in a year, that's
Yeah.
wild.
And the
Yeah.
coolest thing is, and it's happening in different ways in different places. Like you're going house to house in Zambia,
Mm-hmm.
in the Middle East, multiple closed countries. They're having guys come up to them in the street where they're just praying, like, Lord, have people come to us, have people like have dreams, that sort of thing. And people are having dreams, be like, oh yeah, I need to go to the guy in the blue shirt, the white guy, and just ask him. And so people are coming up to be like, hey, I saw you in a dream. I just know I need to ask you about Jesus. And people are getting saved, like boom, off the street.
Incredible. That's wild. Dude.
Like stuff that's biblical that you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. It's like, no, that still happens. God
Yeah.
still works.
Do you see yourself, because you guys are also in the Middle East and in Brazil, right?
And then in Southeast Asia as well.
In Southeast Asia. Are you plans to go to any of those other places, or is it really just mainly your station's Africa?
So we're based on Rapid 14 in Zambia.
Yeah.
This year, we're working through like a whole rebrand and everything. Like most of our primary marketing stuff is from Zambia and Angola kind of area. But we want to reach people in all these different areas. And our goal is 1,000 missionaries on the field by 2030. We're at like 400 right now.
Wow.
And so as we're starting to look through that, we're like, hey, we need to kind of highlight these other areas. And so Devin and I, once we get married, we'll finish our honeymoon, and like 2 weeks later, straight to Brazil, Middle East, down to sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
And then over to Southeast Asia. We're going to hit like 15 countries in the next like 6 months.
That's crazy, man. Dude, I almost missed over that. Like, talk about, you kind of mentioned that at the beginning, like how you met your like soon to be wife, but
Yeah.
like, that's pretty cool, right? Like, you guys tell a little bit about like how you guys met and like got to this point too, where you're getting married in a couple weeks.
Yeah. So she's amazing. Love her to death. So she actually grew up in Massachusetts, 45 minutes from me. Moved down to
Small
Bradenton. I moved to Lakeland shortly after that and
Yeah.
everything. And so our entire lives, we've lived about an hour from each other, never met. And then she led my first trip over to Zambia. And so I met her in Africa after living like an hour away from each other, like our whole
So
lives.
crazy, dude. Yeah.
And so we met. Neither of us were like, I don't know if this is going to work. I thought she was really cute, and I like wanted to see if something would go somewhere, but like I was never going to go on the missions field. And I told my mom from a young age, I'm like, never going to be a missionary. I'm never going to marry some missionary. Like, it's just not going to happen. Here we are.
Here you are,
Mom's
dude.
laughing in my face right now. But pretty soon after I went through the whole missions training, I had this moment with the Lord where he kind of just like asked me, he's like, Josh, would you lay down your life to share my story? And at first I was like, Lord, I don't know if I would. Like, I love the life that I've kind of built for myself already. I never wanted to be at a place where I say no to the Lord. So I really started wrestling with that. And it took like about a month before eventually I was like, you know what, Lord, like, I really hope you don't ask, but if you do, I'll say yes. And like 4 days later, naturally, I got asked if I would take over the media department, but I was never going to date her if I wasn't going to be on the field, because I wasn't going to pull her off, and she was never going to date me if I wasn't coming on the field. And so up to that point, like, there's definitely some interest on both sides, more on mine than hers, but yeah, there was nothing happening. And then finally, once I made that decision, very much outside of her, I was like, okay, let's see if this thing can work. And lo and behold, here we are.
That's amazing, man. Dude, well, congratulations. I'm so excited for you too. And it's cool to kind of coming back to something you said in that, just like how you had that like moment with God, you say, like, where you just felt like I think this will hopefully like kind of help people who are like having experiences like this or thinking about faith or whatever. But like, you had this moment where like, I don't know if you'd say if it was like an audible voice or it was just like this internal voice, I guess, so to speak, like of God just telling you, would you lay down your life?
Yeah, I've never heard the audible voice of God. Some people have, I haven't. But one thing I truly believe is that he gave us the Bible, and that's just the word of God. And so like, if I'm reading through that, like he's speaking to me. And a lot of times he'll prompt things within my spirit. So it's like almost like an internal voice. And I have a conversation with him about random things. Like I'm driving and all of a sudden some dude cuts me off. I'm like, Lord, you need to give me patience. Probably, hopefully in other ways. Cause I keep asking for patience. People keep cutting me off here in Florida.
That's where I lose my salvation.
Oh, dude, it's tough. But it's just an open conversation that I'm kind of having with the Lord a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's just that internal thing where he'll stir something in me, be like, man, this this is like a something that's recurring. Like I'm having this thought, and it's not my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe like speaking to that, and I'm sure you can speak into that too, of just like people listening who felt that way before too. Like I've had that. I've had that a few times in my life where I've been like, man, like, even in some ways, not even to like over spiritualize what I do here, but like even like in doing like a show and a podcast of like thinking about this, of like, man, maybe it keeps feeling like a nudge. You know what I mean? It's like, is it bad to go after? No, I feel like, just kind of answering that and seeing like, after I kind of said, yes, okay, I'm going to do that, seeing just like, oh, opportunity and door opens and things like that. Like, I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit, maybe just like for people who are feeling that, like, oh man, I feel this thing, I don't think I'm trying to discern whether it's God or not, or whatever,
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to do that is start just regularly getting in the Word. The more you start knowing the Lord's voice and spending time with Him, the more you can start kind of separating yours versus His. I know when I first started trying to figure it out, I wasn't reading the Word, and so I was like, I think this is you, God, and I would do something stupid, and then I'd be like, that might not have been Him. And now the more I spend time with Him and kind of build that relationship, it's kind of easier to figure out like, oh yeah, that's your voice, Lord. Like it's not mine. And so it's definitely something that kind of develops over time, but you generally kind of know, and you can test what's going on against the Word. Like if all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I feel like the Lord's really prompting me to like just go like punch this guy in the face. Chances are
probably not.
But if you're like, the Lord's prompting you like to consider like, oh, maybe take this job in this other state because of something that's going to open up as a result, like maybe He is, like kind of explore that, pray about it, spend some time with the Lord about it. That's kind of the way I go about things.
That's great, dude. Even what you said there too. Like, I don't know if I'm necessarily like, if you're listening, you don't have to take my advice, but just how I think about it. Like, I don't think that, like you mentioned earlier, like, you try it and it ended up being stupid, didn't really work out. I don't even know, like just thinking about like the nature of God or whatever, like, I don't know if God would necessarily be like, it's like, oh man, you're testing, you're searching for my voice. You know what I mean? Like, it's still like, I don't think you'll be ruined or anything like that. I mean, obviously there's some detrimental decisions you can make to your life. And so like, there's some obvious ones. But also I believe too, like God puts like people in your life too, for a reason, to be like that have wisdom, that have heard from God, to be mediators and help in that way too. So it's like listening to the voice of God is obviously something we have to learn for ourselves, but also the people He puts in our life,
Massively.
Dude, I love that little theology we just went into there for like a hot minute. But I am like, I love what you do. Like, I love following along with the journey there, and like, just like what doors are opening up there for like the gospel. Like the thing that I love the most too is hearing that story. And you shared that with me before, of like, you guys are able to, like, a language that had no written language, just like a spoken language, start the journey of making that a written language, just so that it can be interpreted into the Bible. Like, not just so, but it's like a huge, like I don't know if like people realize it's a
massive undertaking.
It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah,
when does that actually, do you know, like when that, like,
there are a few books in right now. And I mean, it's massive, and it's like our Angolan guys who are on the ground, who like know Kuvale, know Portuguese and that kind of thing. We're like diving into every single word and making sure, like, yes, does this phrase actually line up with what the Word of God says, and like making sure it goes through properly. So it's gonna probably take them some years
for sure.
But they're going book by book by book. I think John and I think a couple of their books are finished so far.
It just reminds me of like the monks back when, who were just like keeping this thing going. You know what I mean? Of keeping the books written and for people's languages. It's incredible, man. Well, dude, I'm so grateful for you. So grateful for what you're doing. I think it's incredible. And thanks for like coming and being like a part of the show.
Course.
I'd love for that, as we have one more minute left, kind of wrapping up the show. I'd love for you to share with everybody, like maybe just one encouraging thing. And it can be like a story too, of just one encouraging thing that has like, really, really meant a lot to you and this journey you've been on. And then how can people, big important thing too, how can people follow along with you specifically, or even like partner in ministry with what you're doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. If I was going to give any encouragement, man, I'd have to say, just figure out like who you are, like your identity is in the Lord. Like you have the ability to be a new creation in the Lord. And then just walk with him. Like I've never seen my life be better than when I'm walking with the Lord, and saying yes to him is the best decision I've ever made. As far as how people can kind of follow along or partner, you can follow at Overland Missions on Instagram or any of the other networks. And if you want to partner with me and my wife to be specifically, you can go on Overland Missions website, and we have monthly partnerships that you can kind of sign up for, and you can kind of sow into what we're doing in the nations. And so that's kind of how we're able to do everything we do. Like those finances, we believe they're the Lord's, and he blesses the ability to do what we do with them.
That's awesome, man. And we'll also put like the links for you guys listening in the show notes as well, of how you can, follow along with Overland Mission and what Josh and his wife are doing, and just how to partner with them financially. But dude, thank you so much for being a part. It's incredible what you're doing, and just excited to keep following along and hearing more.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course, man.